together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight, as always, 10 p.m. to midnight, Thursday on Rumble, streaming live in the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast channel. So thankful that you're here with us tonight to discuss. I was thinking about how to frame the show. Like, I want to stay away from all the thing going to the Middle East, but all roads lead to Rome. There's not a single area in the economy, food, or whatnot that doesn't lead back to some kind of contraction that's being masked at the moment. And really what I believe is everything you're seeing play out in the Middle East is to give an excuse for all of the shortages now inbound that are culminating at the same exact time. That's the only way I can look at it with a logical sense here. And I wanted to start off with a quote which I've experienced myself this week. Support Israel, you anger 50% of the people. Support Palestine, you anger 50% of the people. Vie for peace, you anger 100% of the people. And, you know, it's like that. I was like, madness sweeps the day. Everything got to pull back, to stop, hold on, take a breath, and like, you can't say that. Oh my gosh. What silliness are we looking at? You know, because I saw that China dumped another $22 billion in U.S. treasuries today. At the same time, Biden swooped up and just pledged another $105 billion for people around the planet. So it seems like that money was just swapped out. $22 billion comes rolling in from China. Hey, we'll throw $22 billion out. We'll mix it up with Taiwan and Israel. Perfect fund. That comes ready to around $22 billion for both of those. See, yeah, thank you for letting me know that. Cam mic was on. Allow me to readjust here. This ridiculous Skype thing keeps pulling me back to the default communication device, which I don't like. Every time it updates or does something, it always pulls back to the original. Everything's just default. I got to sign in somehow and get my account and do that. Stop that ridiculousness. Think about the world we live in right now and the way it's moving. Instead of looking at the distraction which they want you to see front and center, however you believe in whatever you think about that, I'm just going to leave that as the distraction that is front and center, because it truly is. But take a moment to look in the periphery of our world and see how many things have gone awry in terms of economy, food production, society, and then ask yourself if you think what we're seeing now is a distraction for the collapse. Because as I'd been working on the Adapt 2030 channel for these last years, I kept seeing this slow motion train wreck, and I was thinking, you know, it just cannot continue without somebody finally noticing that, you know, something has come off and the rivets have busted, you know, keeping metal parts together, whatever it is. That eventually it's going to be so noticeable that the world will wake up and say, whoa, we have a huge problem here. Now that's if everything continued in its working fashion. There would have to be the blame from somebody, because you can't have entire global systems break down and nobody notice and then just say, well, I don't know, it just broke down one day. But I think we have the culprit to explain away every single thing that will emerge from this point in terms of reasons why everything has broken down.
Everything that has broken down was already there anyway. This just gives the excuse so you don't have any culprits. You don't have any fingers to point. It's just, oh, it was because of the war. It was because of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. It was because of the this, that, or the other. They stopped manufacturing and sending us stuff. But Gerald Celente, who I'm going to be getting on an interview with, hopefully next week, he put out a tweet today earlier that said, as I've said, World War III is on. It only becomes official after the first nuke strike. Gerald wishes everybody an excellent day. Now, I watched him with Daniela Camboni on Stansberry Research, and he broke down, man, when she's like, yeah, Gerald, you called that. The realization of it actually hitting our world just made him freeze and break down to tears for just a moment before he could recompose himself. Because their reports, the Trends Journal, if you are privy into that and have a copy of it, for the last two Trends journals, they're going, yeah, it's definitely, there's too much broken on the world stage right now. It's not coming back. They tried to get their big old global conflagration with the Russia-Ukraine thing. It didn't work, so they were going to move to greener pastures to get it done. Because I really say this, everything is on the precipice at the moment of full collapse anyway, without all of these other things happening. And the way that the word Great Reset, remember Klaus Schwab, Great Reset? Remember that was a hot topic for a minute about a year and a half ago, and that suddenly disappeared off the lexicon radar. But you're seeing this Great Reset marching forward. And as we go through tonight, we can talk about some of the changes to be expected in terms of how AI might be used after this, whatever finishes up. And that's the only way we could possibly allow humanity to move forward. We have to put it in the arms of AI because humans are non-trustable. They're too angry. They're too vicious toward each other. So let's just do everything with AI. And then AI can redivide the country maps like they did after World War I and World War II. AI can now create a new world map section to create the most peaced and harmonious with all the peoples together. And also the AI can maintain the 15-minute cities to guarantee that there's enough supply that is distributed equally across the planet, that everybody has enough, and nobody will go without, especially in the 15-minute cities. So after this, I am going to say they're definitely going to try to push the world to allow everything to be AI controlled under one global governance structure, including the economy, which will probably take a digital form. I'm just saying. But anyway, Ransom, thank you for joining tonight. I know we got a ton of ideas to roll through, especially with the SEC dropping the lawsuit against Ripple. So we're going to digital settlements on that. Ooh, anybody who's holding XRP, hang on to the clothesline and a hurricane. Anyway, Ransom, thanks for joining tonight. If I had added him in, see, I got distracted on the, oh, my bad. I am just like, Ransom, hold on, I'm getting you in, bro. Oh, my brain. What happened to my brain? There you are. All right, Ransom. Kick us into some high gear. Boom. He's still trying to connect here. Oh, this technical difficulty, Ransom. Are you there, my man? Uh-oh. I just don't see anything happening. Well, we'll try to get him back here if we can. Try to get myself back if I can. I don't know what's going on. I don't even know where my brain is. And see, that's the whole thing. Right now, Ransom, I said, you connected, are you? Thank you for coming back, man. My brain is just in a different electromagnetic field at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think what I was last hearing you talk about is, all roads do lead to Rome there. And you said it exactly. That is exactly their plan from their own lips, from the AI control to the 15-minute cities. And I'm getting a chance here where I live to see it being created and built in real time. The governor of Texas has decided that they're going to build a wall between the state of New Mexico and the state of Texas, which they've already started. They've started working on. We won't build one for the border of the United States, but we will build it in between states. And I think that really has nothing to do with people coming from south of the border and everything to do with the fact that El Paso and Las Cruces are both 15-minute cities to be. There's plans in the works. There has been for a long time for this area, all the way back. I'm sure you remember the concept for the North American Corridor that got canceled a couple of times from local governments, but they never gave up on that idea. And basically what they're doing is they're converting Interstate 25 going north and south to become that North American corridor. And yeah, it's really weird. So we have these giant facilities that house thousands of people located around El Paso. And now we're building fences in between the states, which is, really bizarre. And they're claiming it's because of the flow of traffic from south of the border. But I have a feeling that has really nothing to do with it. The way that it's being designed is what we've talked about many times. It's the beginning of the infrastructure for major cities. And keep in mind that if you're not familiar with the area, Juarez, El Paso, and Las Cruces are soon to become a megalopolis, which is 100 miles of straight businesses, commercial real estate, and housing. So just all in a row. So not like New York where you have skyscrapers, but just complete development along the interstate. And that's where it gets controlled, tracked, and traced, because I'm sure you've seen some of the new surveillance cameras that they've set up on all the interstates. They're these giant, I'm not sure exactly how tall they are, maybe 30-foot poles with cameras, license plate readers, facial recognition, all that stuff, that they could be using to track down kidnapped victims, but they don't use it for that. But, if there's any kind of national security threat, they will use that in an instant to track someone down if they wanted to. And I wanted to bring your attention kind of to, like I said, we're in the ongoing building phase. And the reason that they stopped using the Great Reset is because we're in the middle of it. I mean, they don't want you thinking about it at all now. You're supposed to be distracted with all the wars around the world that are really only one war. This is the last war that they're trying. They're even using the old, name of it, the war to end all wars. People are throwing that around already. But there are some really trippy articles out there that they're not even trying to hide it really too much anymore or distract you. Instead, it's become the main event, the main stage for you to watch it crumble right before your eyes. So right here's a good one. And this is ironic because I came up with a new theory, possibly. My son is going to one of the education centers and trying to get a certificate for the government so he can be a good citizen. But down there, they have a coalition of the colors that basically runs the institution. However, there seems to be some counter culture going on there. Today went to a skills development seminar or something, and they were handing out free books. One of them was 1984 George Orwell. And, on the back of the book, it says, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your own eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." And then think about this. Here's the article right here. Ironically, going on at the same time as educators are sneaking books to people that are probably soon to be banned because we live in this exact description of the future. And here it is. George Orwell was sadistic, misogynistic, homophobic, and sometimes violent. Biographers of the legendary writer's wife says darkness that runs through 1984 is a reflection of his soul. Well, he was a eugenicist, and he was part of those circles that believed in some really weird stuff. And just like the cosmic kind of rule that you got to tell someone before you do things to them. That's exactly what one of these books was. I think the other one they gave him was Fahrenheit 451, which is ironic. I've made a video about that because that's happening in a digital format. And if you've seen the recreation of their movie based on that book in the future, that's now, basically language was boiled down to one world language, and that was the emojis, because they weren't allowed to use words, and you couldn't have books, you couldn't own paintings, you couldn't have any thoughts of your own. And here we go. So the world's getting bizarre. Texas soldier ambushed violently at the Rio Grande, but don't worry about it. We're going to tear that wall down. But we're going to put a wall up between Texas and New Mexico. So they're setting us up for the idea of state against state. And like you said, around the world, if you watch the State of the Union address or whatever that was that played before our show, if you got a chance to watch Biden, it was basically a declaration of World War III. I mean, basically, he laid it right out there that the United States is going to spill all of our assets, all that we got, and maybe even, he didn't say it, but they're hinting to it, maybe even your children. They're going to send them over there to one place or another. The theater of war is expanding. And then things like this that make you scratch your head and say, ammo manufacturer plant explosion leaves many worried. Was it on purpose? Woman dies in that explosion. And the ironic thing about this is I went through about 30 different articles about this same explosion, and only one out of the 30 that I read even mentioned that it was an ammunitions factory that made ammunition for regular Americans to buy for hunting, home defense, self-defense, whatever. And then here we got billion-dollar supersized prisons are planned in the works, and I'm sure that you can remember far enough back that they've talked about this for some time with some of their FEMA plans. But here it is, Yahoo News, billion-dollar supersized prisons are slated to be built across the United States. But do they help or hurt public safety? I think they're missing the point on that one. And then here we go. This is the real meat and potatoes. NATO to hold its annual nuclear drills next week, right? And they're going to do that. Where are they going to do it? They're going to do it right on Russia's border. So it's going to be the largest military drill since the Cold War. And then they're going to make it even bigger if, they haven't gone to complete war by 2024, which, keep in mind, is only a few months away. NATO to hold the largest military drill since the Cold War. Oh, ain't that nice? That's nice. And then here it is. Right here, right on their borders, Russia on their borders. We telling them to stop it, but we're, kind of right in there doing that. And as you've seen, the Middle Eastern thing is spread. They have weird people all over the world that want to. As a matter of fact, I saw cars when I was driving my kid to school today. I saw one that said "Free Palestine." I saw one that said "I stand with Israel." In this little bitty desert town, which I'm sure not too many people really have a great concept of the reality of the geopolitical arrangement that's going on in the Middle East. And it was really funny that, Biden there was saying that we're going to go in there and we're going to make it like here. We're going to build stuff and, we're going to help them build the Middle East up. And I'm laughing because we spent the last 20 years destabilizing the entire area that we're now talking about, putting stuff in. And then I'll stop right here before we get into some more craziness. This is something that I mentioned to you a couple of years ago, and it turns out I'm not the only one that thinks the math of the Olmec calendar, which they're calling the Mayan calendar in this article and several others, is actually off by about 12 years. There's no argument that, the amount of years in it, that's 5,126 years. The argument is that it's possible, based on the accurate depictions of each eclipse and where it was going to be in that area, that actually it was 12 years off. And 2023 is actually the end of the Mayan calendar. Not saying that they thought that the world was going to end or anything like that, but this, according to a bunch of people, it's a growing number, say the mathematics points out to 2023 in December 21st. So that will be the end of their calendar. So it wasn't 2012, by the way. It was now, or it possibly is now. So, maybe that's not an accident that they miscalculated the original spread of their idea of the calendar, but it seems that the calendar actually ends in December of this year and starts anew in 2024, which is ironic, another divisible by 12, a 24 year.
Yeah, do we see the devil comet coming in at this time as well? I just sent you the slide. A colossal city-sized comet with horns and an explosive volcano is heading towards Earth. The devil comet. No, I don't have the perihelion on that one right now, but sure looks like it could fill into something nasty, because they're going to try to ride on top of these natural. Can you imagine the arrival of this thing? And also at Ransom, I sent you that pet goat image as well. Has a grieving Muslim woman mourning over her child with a sinking aircraft carrier and a mushroom cloud in the background. And I'm thinking, wow, how, on time is all of this happening? Because, that one point you made up of the draft. And, if you look at Ukraine right now, they're drafting up to 60-year-old males and females as well. So they've run through their population. And now, I don't know if in the United States it would ever get to 60 years old for the draft or not. That's, quite old. And most people at 60 are mostly out of shape, especially in the United States. I mean, even putting them through boot camp or whatever, basic training, they're not going to be able to be anywhere remotely effective at all in any way, shape, or form. There might be less than 1% that would be viable in that kind of situation. And just the way everybody's been brought up today, I'm not sure how effective they would be either. Oh, I got to send you the goat one. Yeah, let me download that. I sent it over to you in Telegram so you can see just check out your Telegram channel. And we do both have Telegram channels if you want to follow that. Ransom Godwin has his own, and I also have mine, Adapt 2030. But if you're thinking about viability of a fighting force, and you look at people raised on video games and very little exercise and how they don't play outside, how the vilification of any kind of firearm, even for hunting, has been done. Like the percentage of our population that's ever picked up and fired anything is, going to be borderline 50%, zero. And then you put them over there against a hardened force. That's just not, it's going to be a Charlie Foxtrot, as they say. A CF. So I'm looking at that, and how many of you are willing to go overseas to fight? And I will say this, and I don't care how you take it. If you are sitting here on either side of the fence going rah, 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 and I don't care what side of the fence you're on. If you're on the Palestinian side, you're on the Israeli side, and you're going, yeah, rah, 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 blow everything up, da, 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 da. Are you willing to send your daughters and your sons over there? Are you willing to get on an airplane and go over there and fight yourself? If not, shut your mouth. Because this is getting drug in, and we are just getting, emotion, psychologically emotive manipulation to drag us into this thing, smiling and cheering the entire way. But until you're willing to put your butt on a plane and go pull those triggers and send your sons over there, gleefully sending them off at the airport, and your daughters as well, you have no right to speak and cheer on the death. Because you want that, it's coming. People are so into this thing, it's almost like they're watching a video game, but it is going to slap you across the face so hard and rip your families apart that you will cry in tears begging for this thing to stop, that you cheered on. So when we're rolling into it here, those people calling for peace are not the crazy ones that need to be just dismissed. They're the actual sane ones that are trying to stop this. You know, because what I really see is both sides trying to push this Armageddon thing and make it happen. And I just don't know what this fascination is of getting onto an Armageddon type of situation. You know, you think it's going to be fun to go through that, and that's what we really need to do because, yeah, it's like Tuesday and we need to support this or something. Really, with just a sane look at the world as it is. Supply chains are broken down anyway. Hyperinflation is, you know, I was just talking about Japan. And I traveled there before. The exchange rate was like 80 to a US dollar. Now it bounced up to 180 to a dollar. It's, you know, around 150 right now. They're struggling. I mean, Japan is just getting raked over the coals with deflation and on the products and inflation on the household goods. And for you to travel in Japan is just about the same price as to travel in Thailand right now, equivalent, but the quality of life is so much better there. You think your American dollar is buying you more and you want to run into this thing headlong and just spend more money and print more money? Christ, you know, the 8 o'clock idiocy show that we saw, they just printed another $105 billion in 10 minutes on that idiot's, you know, 10 minutes of fame up there for telling us how we're going to go to war across 5 different fronts and we're going to print money to pay for it. You don't think it's going to be a extreme inflationary event back in the United States either? And then they had the London Stock Exchange halt trading because of some cyber attack today. And you could see it everywhere. It's starting to contract. If they can drag in Israel into it, at least the analysis that I've done so far is to stop the oil flowing to China so China implodes from the inside and their gold-backed currency, which is the cornerstone of the new BRICS, commodities trading, gold-backed settlements, would stop for some period of time, maybe indefinitely. But you got to realistically, you know, think about if you're going to be cheering your sons and daughters getting sent off to multiple front wars just because you think it's a cool idea that you saw on the news somewhere. And I never understood Vietnam. You know, I'm old enough to have those classes, and you know, it was very fresh in the memory when I was growing up of a lot of people. I always didn't understand why those people who wanted peace so much during that time either split and went up to Canada or they were arrested, you know, for peace demonstrations against the war. You know, and I couldn't understand that footage either where the police were going in with batons and horses and just like bashing the crap out of people who were just sitting there that wanted peace and wanted to stop the war. But so many of them came together that it became a threat to the establishment. You know, a couple 100,000 people sitting in peace. Oh, we can't have that. Send the horses and the dogs in. Because it became the movement of, it rolled over that nobody accepted the war any longer, that the peace movement overtook the war feverish pitch that we have right now. Like, how many walls will we need to build with your sons and your daughters' names carved into them? You know, you go to that Vietnam Memorial and you see people with all different emotions of all different age ranges there. They knew people who died in their classes and their high schools that got sent over to that jungle meat grinder. I mean, you know, the way it looks here, we're going to have those types of walls miles long here at the end of this thing. And can you actually sit there with a straight face and say, yeah, I actually cheered that in the beginning and I sent my children over there. Then I had to send myself and I barely survived. And I got back and my mind was wrecked to smithereens and I can't sleep at night. Are you ready for that? Because that's what they've goaded you into supporting. Truly they have. So, you know, we see these bombs raining in and entire families wiped out on both sides of the border. But are you ready to just send, you know, an entire family off out through the draft and then none of them come back? And you're left there by yourself because everybody that you knew in your family was sent overseas and 0 of them came back. At what point would you stop supporting that and go for the peace movement and be like, whoa, we need to rein this in right now? But I encourage you to look over at the Vietnam War at the peace protests on how violent our government was, either with the soldiers in Ohio who killed those people out of Kent State, or how they just ran them with horses from the mall in Washington. People just coming, holding flowers. Dude, we're talking about the hippie movement, peace and love in the 60s. And they were still that violent to everybody. Can you imagine in today's violent world how much more violent that will be for the people who call for peace? It's ridiculous. You know, that pet goat too, you know, I've seen that for a fair bit of time, and, you know, a lot of things in The Simpsons and Pet Goat 2, all forecasting the future. But this Pet Goat 2 seems to be the one that's truly on the mark on this particular event. I'm not going to say that, you know, it's an unknown who even made this movie. It just pops up, and also recently it was taken down off the net. Same thing when the Georgia Guidestones were blown up or whatever, and they had to demolish the Guidestones, and they took them away after how many years of being up to show the plans. It seems that the destruction of the Guidestones was the marker, the flare in the sky, the starting gun. But Pet Goat 2 shows you exactly what's happening during this event. You know, because when you watch that thing, say 3 or 4 years ago, it didn't make sense at all. It was just like this weird, macabre kind of look at some world destruction, and it made no sense because nothing like that was happening. Nothing like that was on the horizon, and it seemed like it was just purely a fictional kind of work where somebody just made it up and was throwing some ideas out there to see if it would stick on the wall and just, you know, start some talk or something. It made no sense, Pet Goat 2. But now when you watch that, it's actually like watching the news, but a crystal ball to tell you what is coming next. That thing is so prophetic and so on the money. It is spooky when you look at it now. It's not a very long watch, and I'm hoping that some people had copied it, which I never did, and then could repost it somewhere so you can watch this thing. But that one image that is really startling to me, and I see that, and somebody circled it, is the sinking aircraft carrier. And you see her in the Middle East, and then you got the mushroom cloud, and you got these, you know, again, somebody that's wearing a headdress, covering their hair, covering their head, is crying. So look at that and go, yeah, you know what? Those Sunburn missiles and those Onyx missile systems that are ongoing. So just for those of you out there, oh, they got these two types of missile systems, the Sunburn, which is, China has an enormous amount of those. I mean, they're called the carrier killers. They take out carriers in like a single strike going Mach 9. So that's the one single system. And then they have an Onyx system, which goes Mach 4.8. And it's also a carrier killer, but it's a land-based or mounted, you know, jet aerial release fighter off the wing. Now, there's an enormous amount of those in hands with countries starting with L, right on the coast. So see, for me, I'm looking at it, I'm wondering how close in our carriers will get. Because they say they're off coast enough where the Onyx system can't hit them. They're talking about maximum range of about 400 miles or so. So you got to think, is our carrier really, they're going to keep our carriers 400 miles off the coast there? And they're going to fly those jets 800 miles round trip with all that refueling? Or are they putting them in harm's way on purpose? Because can you imagine the response if a carrier gets sunk? Oh my gosh. You thought Pearl Harbor was big to try to get everybody out of the isolationist stance into America to get them into the wartime. Rah, rah, go, go. If they've already pushed the world this far to go rah, rah, go, go, can you imagine if a carrier gets sunk and several other support ships? And man, you know, there's like 5,000, you know, Marines and Navy on those aircraft carriers. So can you imagine one of those goes down? And again, the support vessels that are with it, they're all completely loaded with munitions. Man, you hit one of those, it's like hitting a munitions dump. So be careful what you wish for. And those out there that are calling the people who are already promoting peace, that are kind of ahead of the curve, by the way, that don't want to see any more death or destruction, are the bad ones. You might look back and go, wow, maybe they were the only ones that made sense or were sane during this time. because the entire world's gone mad. And I want to say one thing about electromagnetic activity changes and what occurred on the 7th of October. We are playing at the solar system. The sun was behind us, and the four gas giants lining up into their maximum parallel toroidal field interplay of a second magnetic field in our solar system will occur October 23rd in 2024, 1 year from about a week from now. But as we pass through that field, which is amplifying, currently at its maximum state for this year, not at the maximum state for the entire cycle of this, we pulled through that state of electromagnetic upsetting, for a better term, the same day all of this stuff kicked off in the Middle East. They've done an enormous amount of studies with rats in different electromagnetic field chambers, and the lower the electromagnetic field goes, the angrier those rats became. But the response I see from the world of just cheering to the highest levels of watching, like touchdowns being scored at either World Cup football matches or, Super Bowl for those of you in the U.S., that's now on the war front where you're cheering like that. It's insane is what it is. But we went through that electromagnetic intensity of as high of a disruption as it could be for this year, right when all that stuff kicked off on the 7th. And I am looking at that going, they were riding on top of a natural cycle to get a wider and a greater outcome on your emotions pulling through. They understood that electromagnetic disruption during those days had something to do with amplifying the human emotion and bending it. And Ransom, I'm going to leave it there, I guess, because I don't know. I just see this thing spinning out of control, and I see a bunch of cheerleaders on the sidelines that don't know what they're cheering for. But after they get what they get, they're going to wish they were not in this time any longer. I can see it already. Oh, poor me at the end of this, but you were the ones cheering it on. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but maybe my eyes are looking in different directions because sometimes I see things differently.
I absolutely see the same thing. And that's kind of why I said, last week, we don't have any skin in the game as Americans, so to speak. It's on the other side of the world. It's certain conflicts have been going on for a long time. Like you can go look back at the Ukraine-Russia thing way back before World War II. There was issues there, and then you had the World War II. You remember Ukraine was part of the Russian army and then switched sides and volunteered for the SS and had their own division there. Those same people went on to work for the CIA. Working with Operation Gladio. And a lot of people forget this. So intelligences have had their hand in every single one of these conflicts for a really long time. And they go out of their way to go to specific areas that have ethnic tensions or racial tensions or political tensions, whatever they can use to cause turmoil. And they put assets on both sides of the conflict. So, as we've seen in the U.S., which, by the way, things are getting really weird here. I'm sure you saw the Capitol get taken over again, yet there will be no charges. They're not going to call the people there insurrectionists because they're useful idiots for the latest campaign or agenda that they're putting out. And, if you were listening to Biden there, he basically admitted to funding both sides of the conflict and continuing to support both sides of the conflict while simultaneously saying that there are terrorists. So you can see that the hand's in it, and we shouldn't get fooled again. I joked about that last week, but as you remember, the world tried to scare us with ISIS and extremists and terrorists. And then it turned out that our own governments were the ones arming, funding, and training them, giving them logistics. And that was happening the entire stretch between 2001 and all the way up to a more famous Benghazi incident. What difference does it make now that we just sold out some Americans, let them get killed, and transferred a bunch of weapons? We're supposed to ignore these things. We're supposed to ignore the $81 to $84 billion worth of military equipment that was handed over to the Taliban, supposedly our enemy for the last 20 years. And then we find out that those same weapons that are coming from those places show up in other war arenas. It's weird how that happens. And also weapons from North Korea. Is that real or not? Who knows? But it's going to be used to entangle the lines. And if you've noticed, the entire fleet is, basically in three spots: the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea there, and on the other side of that in the Mediterranean, and then we're over by Taiwan. So you can see the exact locations of where they're going to spread it out from. But don't worry, they have programs in the background to keep everybody from flipping out too much. So let's skip a little topic and talk about the degradation of our own society over here, and the reason we shouldn't even be worrying about any of that stuff, and we shouldn't be involved in entangling ourselves with foreign affairs. And we know that there is a deep state, because the deep state is the one that's playing around with assets around the world to cause geopolitical strife. And what does that mean for us as Americans? Well, it means a crash of our economy. It means bad times coming. And, people are worried about the draft, so much so that that's one of the top Google searches right now. And I'll tell you right here live on the air, I'm not giving my children over to foreign wars. I have no skin in the game. Neither do my children. I'm more interested in helping other Americans get through the bad times that are coming. And here it is. Americans searching, will I get drafted to the war? Hits highest levels since Iraq war in 2007. The EU could push its private message ban, so they're already getting the infrastructure up for an intelligence operation for a world war, very similar to the spying and stuff that was going on in World War II. And I'm not going to name which side was doing that, but they've taken their skills and, they're pushing it into the new world here. So they're going to be banning private messages. That's because they want to know what you're saying. The United Nations Development Program urges governments to push this digital ID. They really need it for what's coming. The Gates Foundation also pushing for digital ID systems, despite criticisms. And then you got what's going on just basically all over the world, is the setup for World War III. And they're already setting up where they can point the fingers and how they can sway the public to go over to their side of thinking. And at the same time, you have real fundamentalists and real extremists and real terrorists out there in the mix, and governments allowing them to kind of move about until it's their time to, I guess, use them or pull the trigger on that. But we have something going on here, and I was mentioning it a minute ago. So we're building the infrastructure, just like in Europe is banning private messages. Over here, we're building physical infrastructure, and it is to restrict the flow of people. And this is all in preparation for a new form of government in which they tell you you just can't go anywhere. And, don't forget that, they already planned this. And every couple of years, they make sure that we remember that they planned for all of this with their doomsday vaults that have all of the good heirloom seeds in there. They're not keeping those GMO seeds that they're, mass producing now. These are the good stuff in these vaults. Some of them owned by Gates, others, they are planning on just getting out of the way and letting the reset happen. And you see it in, just full swing now. There's people living in their cars making $70,000. But this is the real kicker that I wanted to point out. Everybody in the U.S., at least, and probably the major cities in Canada, has realized that there's an influx in not only people coming from other countries to stay in the metropolises and add to the population, but there's an increasing number of desperate people that have given up on life. And they've given up on life because of the things that we're talking about, the mass distraction that demoralizes and dehumanizes human beings at the human level. And you wonder why people that have issues or, addictions or other things that already are weighing down on their soul get desperate, and they end up on the streets of Philadelphia, of Seattle, of LA. I mean, it's all over the place. You see the Walking Dead, the zombies walking around, and there seems to be no real mechanism to try to stop this from happening. Instead, they're increasing it. But Canada's come up with an answer, and I did predict this, if you remember, whenever we did a show before, and I was talking about how Canada, they have made it where you can volunteer to off yourself, and they're doing this in Europe too. So while they're filling up new populations of people, they're trying to convince the people that live in those countries that they're bad, that they're killing the planet, that they're racist and they're homophobics and they're nationalists and they're this and that. They have a never-ending stream of names to degrade and dehumanize all people everywhere. So they just, put it just for you in your area. It's a customized, dehumiliation or a humiliation thing. And Canada, what I was talking about is they were offering the terminally ill state assistance so that they could, end the pain, which, that's one thing. If you want to argue one way or the other about that, that I ultimately think that's a human being's choice. But I don't like the idea of state-sponsored offing of people. I'm not down with war. I'm against all of the murderers. I don't care what flag they fly, which government they're saying who did what, who shot Nellie in the belly with the meatball first. It's murder. It's destruction. It's killing. I'm against all of it. And I think most normal, civilized, rational people are against it too. The problem is they get caught up in these tribalisms and they think that, their voice or their push is somehow helping or not helping a situation. But the governments have a plan for you. They want to help you help yourself not exist. And in Europe, they've just offered it to anybody, little miniature gas chambers that you get in, and then it peacefully takes you away. They've even built an amusement ride that you ride on, and when it's done, you're dead. And they say that's, you go through a euphoric feeling and then you're gone. But now that Canada has come up with a foolproof way to get rid of the homeless and addicted population. They're just going to offer them the same thing they do to terminally ill. And mark my words, this is going to spread country by country. And the more that you look, at the news headlines and you see, oh, God, they're killing everybody there. They're killing everybody here. The world's on fire. We're all going to die. The CO2, we're eating too much meat. We only have 4 more years to eat the babies. Everybody laughed at that lady, right? Whether or not she was trolling or not, it's been less than 8 years since that woman was there. And if you look around the world, we're killing babies everywhere. I saw a guy going through parts of something, and I think you guys know what I mean, and he was pulling it out of a bucket, and he was amazed by, I don't know why he was doing it, I guess to show the world. And I thought, you know what, that's not even a big deal. I'm so desensitized to that idea. That's not even a big deal. We have buildings here in my town, a couple of them, and everywhere in the U.S. where you can just go and some guy will do that exact thing and put those same parts in a bucket. That's where we're at, where governments are offering addicts to just go away. And people that are sad, you could just go away. If you're sick, you could just go away. You know what? And if you won't go away, how about if we cause a major conflict in your area? And if you think that there won't be one in the United States, I sadly think that people are mistaken. They're getting prepared for it. They're assembling it. And if you think about it, there can be no new world order without the United States falling, because we have that weird document. We have that weird idea that each individual, every single one of us created by our creator, has the right to talk, think, defend ourselves, and pursue happiness. And until they get rid of that, they can't have their new world order, because we just won't participate. So they have no choice but to destabilize it and bring the combat here. And I think the avenue that they're going to use is first cartels, and then you're going to see that the cartels are also linked to international organizations, some supposedly the good guys and some supposedly the bad guys, but they're all working together to make sure this new age of what did Aleister Crowley call it? The age of Horus, where the earth shall be covered in blood. So finally, all of the people like him can do as they wilt. And I see that happening exactly right now. And those are those people you were talking about that are the little cheerleaders on the side. Go this team, go that team, kill them all. Like I said, this is the first time I can remember since World War II where people around the world are openly calling for genocide based on their side of the political or religious spectrum. No, we're back in the Crusades. We're back in the Middle Ages. No religion is innocent throughout time. So that's obvious. Just if you know history, not one of them has been innocent, and they're not going to continue to be innocent as long as you have people that think that they control the future's lives of the peons, which is the people under them, and that they have the right to rule based on their bloodlines or whatever they base it on. We're going to have these problems. And I think what they're doing right now is they're finally, their mouths are watering because they see it, that they finally have an opportunity for their one world order. And George Bush Sr., unfortunately, he didn't get to see his promised land. But you remember, he said, I think finally we have a real chance of seeing a new world order so that the rule of law rules and not the rule of the jungle. But if you think about that just for a second, the biggest bamboozlers, psychopaths, and crazy people, the biggest mass murderers are people that are promoting ideas based on a law that they came up with from their government. And that's the biggest murder of mankind throughout history, is democide, death by your own government.
Yeah, and who gets to rebuild after the destruction? Do you think BlackRock will be in line for that? Because we see the same cycle. It's just silliness any way you look at it. It's go through something, destroy it, banks come in and rebuild it, companies come in and rebuild it. Whether you're talking about Halliburton in the modern era, BlackRock currently, or further back after World War II, with Conoco and other kind of oil companies coming in to set up the Middle East after the North African campaigns in Tunisia and Algeria. It's just this time immemorial cycle of destroy, rebuild, and siphon wealth every step of the way with that. I'm just wondering, after this amount of destruction sweeps through the world, who's going to be responsible for rebuilding it? Because I know in Ukraine already that they were talking with BlackRock and Vanguard to come in to do the financing for all of the rebuild after this thing concludes. So if that's not, the dog wagging the tail or the scratching on the back with the flea on, it's so in your face that, what are you to do then? It's almost, they're allowing it to be so in your face, knowing that you're at that position of, well, what can we do? Because now it's so out in the open that you can see what happens if 200 million people in America just stand for peace instead of going to war. They'll still try to take you. But as you could see, their recruitment was down already, where they couldn't get anybody to join the armed forces anymore. So that just, where does that take us? And that whole thing about, ending your own days in a machine that might be a fun ride or something like this. You just have to wonder, along with, the advanced technologies we have currently, if that would somehow be able to capture your soul in there. Because these people that were, obviously you mentioned addicts, etc. Do they even know they're in a soul capturing machine? And then what would be done with their soul? Because, you look at that point, then, you've given your soul literally to something else. You got to wonder, some of these technologies and these ways out for humanity, are they really ways out, or are they traps? How advanced is the technology on our planet? You know, a lot of times, Ransom, I sent you that robo-dog with the grenade launcher on it. You know, before they were putting, I don't know, some kind of military hardware on it. But now this is a whole nother level up. So think about that yellow spot dog with a grenade launcher on it. Same, but different. You knew that was going to be eventually used for harm. And these things we see from Boston Dynamics and the cool robots doing parkour and jumping backwards and doing backflips and stuff, that's 50-year-old technology. You know, what they can do today, I'm sure, you know, there's cyborgs have already blended in with us. And, you know, what you're seeing currently, even in science fiction movies, is what they have at the level of today. They're trying to feed you that it's in the future. That's the whole thing that's insidious, is they're always trying to feed you that it's the future, but everything already has occurred or is occurring right now. So what about this tech? And how high tech is the tech going to get during this time here? Because, you know, gaming this out here, and I want to go back to Operation, you know, High Jump for a second. You know, post-World War II, come back at the end of the break here and continue that. I want to really connect Operation High Jump, electrogravitics and anti-gravity technologies, and how that might be.
In the ancient world, gold was magical. Gold was a manifestation of the sacred, and objects fashioned from it were a means of connecting with a supernatural world. Far from passive deposits of wealth, gold was sacred. It was greatly prized in cult. Objects made of gold were active agents in an ongoing engagement with powerful forces. The Inca used gold to make ritual objects, combinations of gold and silver and gold and copper, called tumbaga. Wearing gold jewelry was a sign of a person's wealth and power. For the Inca, gold was also the blood of Viracocha, their sun god. For the Mayan people and many others in ancient America, gold was part of a complex symbolic system. Gold is mentioned in Greek mythology for examples as varied as King Midas, the golden fleece stolen by Jason, who possessed the power of resurrection, through to the golden apples of Hesperides. The golden apples were guarded by the 100-headed dragon Ladon. The dragon conferred immortality on whoever ate them. Over the past 5,000 years, from the Egyptian pharaohs and the merchants of 14th century Venice to world governments in the space age, man has treasured gold for its utility and value during times of both prosperity and disparity. Through the rise and fall of great dynasties and civilizations, gold has maintained its purchasing power as a reliable store of value for millennia. Gold has been used as money since 560 BC, when King Croesus of Lydia created a gold coin in his own image. Ever since, it has continued to increase its long-term value and remains the world's most universally accepted form of money. Today, the demand for gold continues to flourish globally. History proves that fiat paper money is designed to go to zero through inflation, whereas gold has intrinsic value in which it maintains forever. Paper money is a debt instrument. Gold is an asset of wealth in its own right. It does not depend upon any governments, corporations, or individuals' promise to repay. ITM Trading has spent the last 27 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn or currency collapse. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call, 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422, or go to learn.itmtrading.com/MIAC. And keep watching Mountain High Time and Mini Ice Age Conversations if you know what's good for you.
Releasing the show notes from our programs, just bullet point list of what we talked about so you can start the conversation with others or do a deep dive in your own research. Head over to oilseedcrops.org. In the nav bar, you'll see MIAC radio show. Click there, put your email, and we'll get that out to you on a weekly. And please remember, with YouTube's algorithm running today, like, subscribe, and click that bell to get notified.
Cloned food, edited food, fake food, and unhealthy foods of all kinds. That's not what Mama was cooking when you were a little bambino. You want to know what's in your food. I know you do. Heaven's Harvest has Protein Booster Kit is the bolster of your daily emergency meal plan. Containing only essential proteins, beef, chicken, and eggs, stock up on vital amino acids and nutrients required to thrive in all situations. They got the fruits and vegetable buckets, the breakfast bucket kits, and for a You Health Food Nuts, they got an organics kit. Now that's knowing what's in your food. They even got the heirloom seed kit so you can plant your own food. Heaven's Harvest Heirloom Vegetable Seed Kit is a simple way to start storing seeds safely. Not sure what varieties are hardy, easy growers, which thrive and taste the best. They have taken the guesswork and time out of the process of seed saving. Now you know what's in your food because you grew it. Go to heavensharvest.com. You can save 15% at the checkout with code ADAPT.
Somehow during this global conflict, that will be the new energy system, because we know that the green energy with the solar panels and the windmills, that's not going to work for enough power. But if somehow these craft were to crash and we could re-engineer it, that could suddenly be a new power source for the new world. And you can already see the new world is planned, but it needs a new power source, but oil's probably not going to do it, because you could see during this time that all the oil infrastructure across the planet is going to be damaged, probably on purpose, because that way, most of these OPEC countries that are now aligned in the BRICS trading bloc, if you can wipe out all their oil infrastructure, they'll have no revenue. And if oil's not really a thing to trade anymore, that could be a commodity to offset, they would be forced back to the US dollar. And also it would take them 50 years plus to recover. So think about, and again, the distraction is what we're seeing in the Middle East, but what we're really seeing is a dollar versus de-dollarization campaign going on across the planet. This is a cornered animal, the United States, going into a collapsing economy and hyperinflation, and the world throwing the reins off of control of the dollar. They want to keep that power, and they're going to do anything in their means to do so. They're going to burn the planet down to keep that dollar intact. This is truly what we're witnessing. It might appear that it's something else, but in the grand scheme of things, it's incredible simple of what we're seeing right now. Dollar versus BRICS. Now we have to come to a new energy system for the new world to evolve and the new world to continue. We need a new form of energy to power the factories that don't pollute. Windmills ain't gonna do it, sorry. You know how many bald eagles, hawks, birds of prey, raptors, just any kind of birds have been whacked and knocked out of the sky by those blades spinning around? Millions. So when people go, oh, there's a decrease in wildlife, you can see it. We got to think about the cavitation, vibration, and direct interference with any echolocating animals that are in the water, from turtles to fish to porpoises and whales. Anything like this is being self-destructed by those windmills in the offshore wind farms. And the damage they do over vast swaths of mountain ranges and the updraft, well, that's the same updraft that the birds follow too, but to get up at higher altitude. And everywhere you look, the modern invention that's supposed to solve these problems is now responsible for the degradation of the wildlife. It's not you driving your car. It's the windmills splitting the sky. And thank you, Revolution Radio, for allowing us to talk about such subjects right here. So if anybody appreciates free speech and trying to connect some of these ideas that we have tonight and will continue to do, give a donation to Revolution Radio to keep them on air here. Revolution.radio, right in the nav bar at the top, donate tab. You can choose your choice, which is easiest for you. And any amount will help to keep this production crew and the station and the website and everything that's required to allow the free flow of information. And I've said this before, and I truly believe it. This is going to be one of the last places on the entire internet that you will have a chance to hear free speech and free ideas, as things like YouTube will be closed first, for sure. Other venues in the podcast, they're going after that now. But what they haven't or they can't get at is live radio, especially on a more private, listener-supported channel, because they're not reliant on these big advertisers to pull plugs and collapse stations like we've seen again and again. Say the wrong thing, corporate advertisers pull it. But this is outside that scope. So if you do feel it's worth it to have it on air, please consider a donation. Because the way I'm looking at the world now is you have to think about antibiotics. Now, antibiotics go into your body and they wipe out the bacteria, whether it's good bacteria, beneficial bacteria, or it's bad or harmful bacteria. It wipes everything out and starts over. It's almost like these globalists that we're seeing are the antibiotics that are being introduced into the world. Because you might think it's destruction and how terrible would that be? Those people there, they're not going to have an economy and it's going to take forever. And, it's going to cost them so much money to rebuild. And could they ever rebuild? And da-da-da-da. The answer is absolutely they'll rebuild. And it's going to require an interest payment to get the loans for them to rebuild. So the bankers are, if you think people are cheering this war on stuff on either side, that's nothing compared to the bankers jumping, probably banging their heads on the ceiling as high as they're jumping, supporting this thing because they know every single explosion they see on the TV and echoing sound of reverberating shock waves means more money in their pocket. Every reverberating shock wave is an extra 0.1% in interest that they'll need to raise the rates. 8% is now what you need to pay for a home. I'm wondering what it'll be for rebuilding loans, because the higher their interest rates go, the more that they're going to also be able to charge for rebuilt loans through BlackRock and Vanguard. This world's being set up to collapse and mask the collapse. That was already ongoing anyway. Like I started in the beginning of the first hour. All of these things were in the collapse mode anyway. It's just like the fourth turning. We're in the 80th year of this fourth turning. We're at the winter phase of the fourth turning. It was all in the downturning trend anyway. So what better way to mask it is destroy everything and then rebuild it. And again, that follows the fourth turning. The spring phase is when everything's growing again because there's so much money poured into it that everything's growing after it was destroyed because there's so much money being thrown around to rebuild. And it's strange how World War I was the same in Europe. Destroy, rebuild, golden age. How much money was floating around before the Great Depression in America? That was a direct result of all that destruction in Europe and the rebuilding. And America had a lot of the steel plants and all these kind of things that they needed for rebuilding in Europe. So, of course, the American economy was rocking because we were giving them supplies to rebuild Europe after we were also destroyed it. World War II, the exact same. How do you think Japan got all of its materials? Do you think the materials just magically came from China? Not at that time. They sure didn't. They came from the United States to rebuild Japan. Why do you think we went into that golden era after that dip off of 46 to say 52? It was kind of a, I wouldn't say, it was sort of a very hyperinflationary and very extreme inflation from, say, the 1946 to 1952, things in America got extremely expensive, but then that kind of leveled off and they, brought it back into check again. But the amount of money that was flowing into America for rebuilding after World War II was astounding. The world today was built off of that money flowing back into America for raw materials to rebuild not only Europe, but Asia. So can you imagine now, when the entire planet's rocked by destruction, who's going to have the money to rebuild it? China. They're going to be the ones with the steel plants this time. They'll be the ones with the automotive manufacturing this time. Now, somehow China will be spared. I really believe a lot of destruction will not be in China this time. Huge amount of destruction across the United States. Probably not too much in South America. That place is never really affected too much. But you're going to watch the switcheroo, like they have always said, oh, the wars never touched American soil in World War I or World War II. But if China's left alone, along with Russia, then they would be the ones that would rebuild. And then all of a sudden, the BRICS currency makes sense because all that money is going to flow in because they have all the hard manufacturing that we left go in America. But this new world that's going to be built upon will not be built upon fossil fuels again. And it sure won't be built upon green energy and some sort of windmills and solar panels. It's going to have to be something different. And here's my conclusion. Now, Ransom, I don't know if you'll agree with this, but I'm going to paint you a little picture for 2 minutes. And I'm going to take you back to Admiral Byrd. And we're going to go down to Operation High Jump post-World War II, 1946 and 1947. Again, these same years after the war. Expedition, down to Antarctica to supposedly chase those who had fled out of Germany with advanced technologies. And they'd set up, I guess, their own high-tech civilization already, where the craft that came out of the water and greeted Admiral Byrd were so advanced, so unbelievably mind-blowing with anti-gravity technologies and speed that was just unseen or even unfathomable at that time. Was already at the advanced stage of being at full production and full usage. And then, they hightailed it out of there and have not been back since. Why do you think Antarctica is off limits? Because that civilization down there said, yo, this place is off limits. Nobody comes here, right? And why has no nation ever pushed back against that? Yeah, they might say, well, there's some research bases down there, and each country has its own little research base for, I don't know, studying the emperor penguins or something. But you can't tell me there's all these research bases all studying emperor penguins, and that's all the reason they're down there in Antarctica. A lot of them are probably looking at the ancient ruins that are down there under the ice. But imagine this, the world goes completely bonkers, and it really does come to the point of some self-destruct mode. Well, suddenly out of the ice yet again, some 70 or 80 years later, whoosh, all these anti-gravity craft come and just park over our cities. And they're like, the hostilities need to stop immediately, bro. And as they talk about in the Bible, people will look in the sky and they're going to witness things in the sky that are so awe-inspiring that everybody's going to drop their weapons on the battlefield and just walk home to their families. Now, an alien invasion would absolutely be that. Now, what if it's not a real alien invasion? What if it's truly that anti-gravity technology post-World War II from that same civilization / whatever race of people that was in Antarctica after World War II? And they come out and they stop the war. Well, after that, everything would have to be rebuilt anyway that was destroyed. But imagine if they said, okay, well, now we're going to give you our anti-gravity technology because y'all are burning fossil fuel, you're destroying us. The windmills aren't going to work, you're killing all the eagles, whatever the excuse might be. But imagine if that is truly where it comes out, and this whole thing's been planned for that to happen because they need the conversion to a new energy system. And all of a sudden, this new anti-gravity craft provides us free, clean electricity using the Earth's magnetic field. And it allows us to transport things across the planet on all the blown up roads and railways and bridges. We won't even have to use them anymore. We can leave them as relics to a barbaric people and put AI in charge of everything after that. But we'll have our new energy system that's clean burning. And we could restart the stock market based on everything. You know, Ransom, is that too far-fetched, or does that seem like it's plausible there that could actually happen?
You know, it could happen, but I just see that, you know, anything short of an actual alien invasion, the world elite really have no need to change the program other than the reset cycle, and it's different each time. I don't know. I mean, why would they, you know, like I said, short of that, I don't see them sharing that technology until we're at a civilization that's past the point of private property. So you can't own a car, you can't own a house, you can't do any of those things that was on the traditional metered system in a new world. You can't own that. So they may let, you know, public transportation, everything controlled from the top down, you know, in that kind of world. But that would be the 1984 world that we're talking about. We're not talking about you, George Jetson, getting in your little hover car and going to work at the Sprocket Company. No, robots are going to be doing all of that. And matter of fact, they're kind of openly saying something that I've been talking about for some time. And when I speak of AI, is that we've already have given control of our entire economic system to AI long ago. So the idea that, you know, they don't control the economies from the top down and factor in each trigger that they put off, like the hike in gasoline that's undoubtedly coming because of the Middle East conflict. It's already, I think, pushing $4 a gallon here. They're not gonna give us any of that stuff unless they get a complete reset, and that's that reset I was talking about, where parents no longer have children, the state grows them, and people no longer have you know, freedom of travel because you don't belong in those areas, or your social credit score doesn't allow you to because you're not from the right class or right families or the right job title to do that. And I think all of that's far off in the future. That's your grandchildren's world, but it's real enough. So right now is when they're implementing it, though. And in order to do that, we have to have total destruction. And I actually agree with you that I don't think that there will be any combat or destruction in China because evidently, you know, China's walking a tightrope on collapse right now. And it makes me think that even though people think that there's still these nation states, they're kind of down on the lower end of understanding. There is already a world government. They showed us that that is the case in the last couple of years, where the whole world cooperated for one single idea. No matter what their differences biblically or historically or ethnically, they all put that cover over themselves, and they all used intravenous drugs. And that happened, and nobody can unknow that happened. The whole world participated in that. And now we're here where even the SEC head, financial crash caused by AI nearly unavoidable. In other words, they already have the get out of jail free card, just like I've talked about before. They can collapse the economy. It won't be any particular person's fault. Any of the people that come on TV and talk about it are going to be people that don't even understand the system. I'm sure you know who Max Kaiser is. He's one of the original guys that got into the AI, and kind of the entire Wall Street was transitioned over to AI in the early 2000s at least. No one even knows what's going on with the numbers that's moving around. That is so far out of it's like the president of the United States having several classified clearance levels that he's not clear for. These are things that show you in your face that there is already a breakaway civilization. The question is are they really going to fully reset? And indications are that yes, but judging by the past, this process can take 10, 20 years. They always use incrementalism, and then they do something big to ever change what it is. So there's no argument. And without something happening as a trigger here in the United States to get all of the, I don't know how to put this, the innocent, patriotic-minded Americans that really think that, the news is telling you the truth and that their government wouldn't do things that are bad to them and that we are definitely the good guys. All of those people will, undoubtedly be patriotic. We saw that in 9/11. We saw everybody from all walks of life decide, hey, that was bad. And we saw that on Pearl Harbor when we were attacked then. And we know now historically that was totally preventable, totally planned, not by the Japanese, other than that they were planning on attacking Hawaii. So they were going to do that regardless. But there was not quite a stand down order, but more like we're just not going to tell anybody what's going to happen. And now we know the Israeli thing wasn't as clear cut as they told us. And we kind of knew that at the beginning when we know that they have the most advanced surveillance state on the planet, the best CCTV cameras that are controlled by AI once again, but somehow, some 7-hour stand down order happened, I guess, so everybody could get their stuff together and know what they're going to do next. It seems like it was obviously played out to provoke exactly the outcome that they wanted, which was to spread a Middle Eastern conflict, which, by the way, don't forget, we destabilized the entire Middle East since 1991, starting with Iraq. And don't forget, one of our own generals, I think it's Gates is his name, was bragging about getting intel in his own speeches in the early 2000s about, hey, you know what, we're going to go to war. And he was like, you mean with the Taliban? He's like, no, we're going to go to war in Iraq. Oh, what's that got to do with it? Well, I don't know, but we're going to knock down 7 countries. And ironically about that, he was just hearing that, but it was already written about in the Project for the New American Century. Now we're seeing the outcome of that idea. And that idea was brought to you by neocons, which are the remnants. I hate to say it for people that don't want their bubble busted. They are the remnants of the leftover Nazi party that got brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip. These are things we know for a fact that happened. Now, I don't know about UFOs in Antarctica or last battles or what could have happened down there. And I really don't know, but I do know that Operation Paperclip is factual. And that happened in 1947, the same year you're talking about, where we created the National Security Council, which is a made-up term for 3 people deciding what the entire nation does outside of the Constitution. We started the CIA, and we started the Air Force, which, would have been in control of any information regarding anti-gravitic devices. So even if there was or wasn't any real instances of that, this massive surveillance state was born, and it's come to fruition in 9/11, where they expanded their powers. And now we fast forward to the middle of their plan. And this is the middle of their plan to get a one world government completely. And I don't think they even care who's the face of that government, as long as it's a totalitarian one world thing. So I don't think they care if capitalist communist China and the Chinese party does it, or if Russia and their new version of capitalism does it, or the United States wakes up, breaks away from all of this entanglement and starts being a new superpower, which I think we can very easily. Judging by World War II, what you were talking about, would you drop your weapons in the middle of the battlefield and go back to your family? I don't think so, because in World War II, we had, all those people went over there. They didn't really want to go, but they went. They did their job. They never dropped their guns. They came back. And by the way, if I saw something in the sky that was even scarier than one of the Earth-based militaries, I probably am not going to drop my gun either, unless, it's automated, like one of those robots that you're showing that's old. We know about the robot dog. We were joking about that years ago, that they were going to be putting that on there. I knew that was going to happen. Now they're showing you the low-tech versions of that. Meanwhile, we have completely AI-powered and driven killbots flying around in the sky that are next generation, and throws that stuff in the dust. Those are the toys they're going to give to the people that are going into the meat grinder the regular people. They're going to get to play with the robots. And this is how they're going to clean out every single last outlier group on the planet. And I hate to tell you that when that's over, they're going to turn against the populace in a 1984 style. Anybody that says anything against the new party will be moved off to one of these nice new prisons they're building. I mean, think about that. And what do you think about the SEC head admitting that financial crash caused by an AI is nearly unavoidable? So in that, not only are they talking about it being powered by AI and ran by AI, but outside influences like, and if you remember earlier in the spring, I told you they were going to bring us nonstop stories about ransomware and hackers because they completely want to seal up and control every last loophole and avenue of the internet. And that starts with this bill that's going on in Europe where they're banning private messages so you can't communicate with each other. You can't tell people what's going on. And think about the position that human beings have put themselves in where there's no form of old school communication. Everybody's connected into these devices that can be used for control, not only through the programming that it sends, but telling you when emergencies are and which way to go or what's happening or what you're supposed to do. And the fact that they could turn them all off at the same time, leaving everyone completely in the Stone Age as far as communication, where you would not even know what was going on. So like say an EMP just dropped over the U.S. mainland, and most cities are out, cell phone coverage is out, power's out, and we wouldn't even know if a conflict was happening other than seeing a mushroom cloud in the distance, kind of like that little picture you showed. That's the state of where we're at. And at the same time, we have to worry about actual natural events that they seem to be planning on happening. And that way, no one can ever point a finger to any specific group. And if they do, it'll be picked by the state as being the bad guy. So that'll be anybody anywhere that says anything different than the newest thing and the newest agenda. You can't speak against the party. And it's already becoming that in the United States. I mean, if you've been paying attention to our legal system, it's a complete joke. It's two-tiered. They only prosecute what they want. They don't prosecute other stuff. Whatever fuels their agenda, they let happen. It's a complete worldwide false flag and stand down event. They're going to stand down as natural forces, human forces, and governmental forces destroy and burn everything down to the ground. And of course, they don't have a problem with that. They are going to be the people in charge of all of the contracts, just like you said. And throughout time, we've always done that. We conquer, then we build on top of it. And every empire in the past, you can pick the Spanish or British, whoever you want, the Ottoman Empire, they always conquered, then took the riches of the land that they moved to, and they, centralized it. And what we're seeing is the final eventual end to centralized government on this planet. Now, you do have to ask yourself, are we doing this in the name of AI? Are we doing this in the name of transhumans? Or is there an actual off-planet or interdimensional entity that is helping move along this agenda in a specific, calculated, quantum computered, planned out way? And in that way, we indeed are living in the simulation, which, by the way, I keep seeing they're pumping that idea more and more every day that there is no free will. I just read a scientific paper from a scientist that concludes that actually we do not have free will. We're just NPCs all living in a programmed machine. And then when you look and you say, hey, no, that's not true, I have free will, look at who decides where you're going to live, when you're going to eat, what you're going to eat, what you're going to watch, what you're going to like, what you're not going to like, what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to think. All of that stuff is becoming a reality. And it's so funny that the Marxists, leftists, and government people don't like the book 1984 that's written by one of their heroes, because it actually tells you to your face what's happening. And now we're in a time where you cannot ignore the similarities of supposedly a fictional tale that is playing itself out in reality right now.
Yeah, all brought to you by the crisis industrial complex. And you have to think about how much of it is manufactured. And that point of, is it off-world entity controlling farm Earth?
Because I'll take you back 6,000, 7,000 years in history, and it always seems to be the same. Rinse and repeat. Because myself, if any of you are listening for the first time tonight on our program here, thank you for joining us. I follow 400-year cycles in the sun that dictate how much food we can produce on the planet or not, and how that ebb and flow of solar activity is also responsible for plentiful, abundant food production, which we get into these cycles of, where we might sit today in the hedonistic type of, there's so much abundance with calories that we have enough time and energy to do other things of pleasure and art and this sort of, things evolve faster, especially mathematics and engineering and invention, these types of things, because people actually have all the basics met because there's so much food production in a stable, warm climate. But the inverse, when we collapse off of these into these, 400-year lows in solar activity, these grand solar minimums going on to this cycle where, the food's not very plentiful. And you'll see, well, you would consider, I wouldn't say exactly dark ages. I don't think that's really a descriptive term for it, but more time spent chasing the basic necessities for life, and thereby a lot of things contract. The economy, people migrate to other places where food might grow more abundantly. There's a lot of reshuffling of this population migration, for a better term, but on 400 years prior in the 1600s, and then go back into the 1200s, and then go back into the 800 AD era and ranges. There was that skip jump in 535, 536. But if you go back, you can keep taking this thing 400 years BC if you like to. But I'm wondering, at the same time as what might be pegged as a grand solar minimum civilization collapse based on food production, is it at the same time could have been ridden on top of by these elite to get a more and greater and larger outcome from natural cycles? But when I look at this, we are talking of time frames of thousands and thousands of years of the same families, the same money, the same rulers, the same governance structure in power through the ages. Now, what has allowed that power structure to complete itself and stay intact through the collapse, the shredding, and the reassemblance of civilization, multiple cycles of this 400-year cycle? And I look, if we go further back in time and antiquity and stories of old, what was around 8,000 years prior? What was, the pre or post Younger Dryas era? What was happening as the world was coming out of the Ice Age? Because if you follow some of these Sumerian myths and legends taking us back 400 years with the creation of man, that was an off-world entity that has gold mining colonies on Earth that was, from Jupiter. And then we have these movies showing you in your face Jupiter ascending exactly where we sit as the farm Earth. So I'm wondering, the grand solar minimum was slated to onset right now. As we step off of this solar maximum in solar cycle 25, almost everybody unanimously agrees, from NASA to the European Space Agency, Bukovo Observatory in Russia. I don't care where you are, from Spain to Russia, United States, Europe, it doesn't matter. Unanimous is we are stepping off into prolonged, incredibly low sunspot activity, beginning about now, because the predictions that were out for an extended solar cycle 25 are now being reeled back by years into, are we already at the peak? Years early. So with that collapse phase, is this war around the world also marching lockstep with the collapse of the solar maximum years early, about 3 years earlier than anticipated. And with that, the food production would decline with it. At that point, you could point to, space agencies and governments and say, whoa, 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 you all knew this so low in solar activity was coming, and you didn't let our families get prepared. This didn't blindside you. You had 2 entire solar cycles, which is about 22 plus years, which is around the year 2000 that they knew this was here. But the timing of it was off by 1 solar cycle. Here's the thing, all the experts that I had known when I first learned this information were pointing to solar cycle 24 as it stepped off, that solar cycle 25 would be incredibly low and incredibly short. Well, they nailed the incredibly short part, because this is going to be one of the shortest solar cycles since they started measuring them back in the 1700s, for sure. The intensity of it did ramp up, but the solar cycle is an average of sunspot activity. So if something ends 3 years early and goes to 0, that average is going to dive down comparatively to what it is now if it had stayed steady and rolls out over the next 3 years, and then it tapers off in its normal fingerprint. But I find it highly suspicious that we're dropping off on the solar cycle, coming into extreme low solar activity. All space agencies predict it. And the one thing that is unanimous that goes along with this decline in solar activity is a very steep drop in food production. So you would be talking global food insecurity, and I don't care what nation you're in, it's going to be very difficult to grow food at the level we do today. Explain that to the populace. Well, you wouldn't want to, because they would be so angry that governments would be toppled across the planet, not from without, but from within, because the populace would be just so incredibly angry as their kids starve. And things get so unaffordable on the food end, as we're starting to see now. And again, these things start to match up as you're looking at it. Why is food now forget the war aside, why is food so expensive now before we have global lockup in food supply chains? I mean, with the prediction of the solar activity coming and food prices skyrocketing, and then we see food prices skyrocketing, the availability of foods decreasing, but somehow they didn't match up in the media that, hey, solar activity and you guys are going to be paying more for your food. And we're starting to see that lockstep. So what happens now? We come off the solar cycle, we're going to have an excuse for complete, removal of global crop yields. I mean, you look down in the Southern Hemisphere now. I thank you, Jero, for sending me all the links and helping me out track down a lot of these things. But he has sent hundreds of links to me about disrupted weather systems, droughts, things that are already disrupting Southern Hemisphere crop production to the point of being near biblical of the amount of crop losses in the Southern Hemisphere this year that are not going to manifest into food production as we understand it, because the Southern Hemisphere produces a lot of food. But after that huge amount of water vapor went up into the atmosphere in the Hunga Tonga eruption, systems are disrupted. The hydrological system, the rainfall patterns, everything is just so incredibly disrupted in the Southern Hemisphere that they're going to struggle at best to produce food this year. Now, that alone would go right along with the solar cycles, because decreased solar activity, you got increased volcanism and tectonic activity, earthquakes. That's a given. Those two go hand in hand. There are so many thousands of peer-reviewed research. When you get into these really low solar activity periods, like the centennial minimum at the beginning of the 1900s, you saw these bigger sets of earthquakes. The New Madrid fault zone, right in the bevy, right as we were coming out of that Dalton minimum. It's a well-known, well-established connection between incredibly low solar activity and the amount of much larger earthquakes and volcanoes. So, you start to see the correlations between a lot of different geophysical effects and then the thing, our weather systems. And you would expect a larger volcano, and then we saw Hunga Tonga. That was the biggest eruption in almost 200 years, but it was water vapor based, not ash, luckily, or else we would be into some serious food difficulties now. If that was over land like it was in any other previous eruption along the equator that disrupted food production, yeah, this war probably would have started right last year because they would have needed the excuse. But the timing of all these things coming on with the solar cycles, and these elite, they follow the solar cycles. They follow the energies from the heavens. Their timeline is the sun itself. The way it behaves, it reacts, higher energy, lower energy, that is their timeline. So with all of these disturbances across our solar system, and somehow now, with anticipated massive declines in yields coming out for this growing season in the southern hemisphere, to the point that it would cause massive inflation in food anyway. And right on time, there's a massive war to explain away all the supply chain disruptions and all the food price increases. It seems to me they're masking and still are trying to the best mask all of these natural cycles that are happening. But again, it seems like they're riding on top of the natural cycles to get a greater outcome of whatever that is intended to be. These cycles are natural, they're here. We deal with them, we've dealt with them for how many hundreds of thousands of years, from the Ice Age cycles to this little small 400-year cycle. They all disrupt food production, they definitely shift society, and they shatter civilizations. Nothing you can do about it, just deal with it. It's part of where we live around this yellow star. For all of these things to be matching up and kind of running in parallel at the exact same time is a little difficult for me to buy that it is just random happenstance. And like I say, this is the crisis industrial complex riding on top of natural solar cycles. I mean, how much control could you get if the world's food supply shrinks and you're in control of the world's food supply? I mean, it already is that way to a point with corporate control of, your boxed food in supermarkets. But there's a lot of outside of control of that. People growing their own food, Amish farms, farmers markets, farms, etc. But if you can consolidate control of that, and a lot of these executive orders do exactly that. They take control of farms and means of production during wartime activities. Then you can consolidate all of the food production across the planet. Because, see, that's one wild card not a lot of people are thinking about, the executive orders to take control of all the farms. Now, what if it is, like it sounds good, like, all right, great, the government's going to take control of farms. They're going to grow more food. That means we're going to have more food for the troops. We're going to have more food for our people. And hopefully we won't have to go back to rationing cards. What if it's the opposite this time? What if it's to take control of the farms and put them all offline? The farmers won't have any control of what's happening on their farm. If the government comes in and just takes it completely offline, and the farmer's growing 1,000 acres of, let's say, corn, and they come in and they grow 0, and the farmer's like, dude, I still got the machines and the seeds, I'm going to grow. And they're going to go, no, we control the farm, and we say you're not growing a thing. You grow a thing, you're going to jail, prison actually, and we're going to confiscate your farm and throw your family off of here. You grow a single ear of corn this year on this property, and you're going to prison. That's the kind of thing that nobody's looking at. Control of the means of production during wartime. See, I'll throw that back at you, Ransom, because I'm kind of stuck where that goes. I mean, how nefarious could it be to take food production offline by using an executive order to pretend like they're going to boost food production? Everything's in inverse, man, this black and white world we're living in,
Yeah, and yet they kind of do it right in your face. I don't think that's far-fetched at all. What's even scarier is the food that's being given out right now. Just a little bit of studying into what you're eating at fast food places and grocery stores would have to leave you with no other impression than that there are evil forces out there trying to get you. I was showing everybody this article that's talking about, you were mentioning all the antibiotics in the food. Well, that's just, one little thing that's in there. What about all the anti-parasitic drugs and the contraceptive drugs that are found in 10 out of the 10 fast food chains that they looked at? In other words, the fast food is a contributing factor to the infertility problem in the Western world. Now, you could say, oops, that's just accident, and, that happened because of industry and, whatever. Or, judging by, half of the political movement in the U.S., that's on purpose. And actually, we've known about these ideas all the way back into the 20s from some of the eugenics programs. They would get U.S. judges to sterilize people because they didn't think that they were, useful to society. And that's right here in the U.S. They gave women hysterectomies against their will. All kinds of weird stuff like that has happened right here in the country you live in. But now we're dealing with a more advanced, futuristic, technological attack. They're not going to take you to court and have some dirty judge say, hey, you know what? You can't have children. Instead, we'll just feed it to you and you'll do it to yourself. And we'll give you ideas like, you know what? You're bad anyway. Why don't you off yourself? We'll give you ideas like instead of having the most precious right that's ever been had by human beings on this planet, which was the right to have procreation and continue your civilization into the future. Instead, it's inverse, exactly like you said. They have convinced people that the opposite is true, and that if you stop your genetic line, that's a right. You should do that, and you should be proud of that right. But if you don't do it, we'll get you with the fast food. How about that? Just accidentally, oopsies. We didn't mean to put a bunch of contraceptives in all of the food. We didn't mean to accidentally put, chemicals in the processing and the wrapping and the packaging and all of these things that mess with people. It's just crazy. I mean, according to this article, just about everything that you're eating has hormones, glyphosate, pesticide, heavy metals, all kinds of stuff. That some other stuff I can't pronounce because I'm not even sure what it is. Antibiotics, antiparasitics, contraceptive drugs, all of these are found in fast food. And people are, eating away. They're putting it down. And you might think that your favorite, restaurant, because they advertise natural and healthy and all of that stuff, that's all a trick. People figured that out a long time ago. When you go to the grocery store and you see a package and it says all natural or made in nature, it has they're so good at the advertising. They even make the little logos kind of look like the organic ones, but not quite. You have to really look through your food. And I wanted to get to that. You're talking about food. This Halloween, I suggest that when you guys are going out there to buy candies for all the little ones dressed up, that you might go by the rice and beans aisle and get you the largest bag of rice, or a couple of them, or 3 or 4 of them, and the largest bags of beans that you can find, seeds that will sprout and things like that. And the reason I say that is I just went grocery shopping, and guess what? At the store I'm in, they removed all of the organic food. I knew that was coming because it was slowly shrinking. And I've mentioned that over the last couple of years, how, I go to the grocery store and it's different every time. The shelves are half as tall. The hours are no longer 24 hours. There's less employees. More of it's being pushed out of the back. That's the good food, where it doesn't even reach the shelves to the poor people. Only people that can afford to have accounts and order online are actually getting the better food. And now they're probably not even getting that because the store has removed not only the, homemade foods and stuff that are coming from Mexico that are probably a little healthier just because, but they removed all of that stuff. They removed all of the organics. And when I thought, you know what, I want to go see what's going on with the bulk items, we go around, there's barely any bulk items. So people out there are getting it, and they're already planning ahead, because there was an entire empty shelf where all of the big bags of beans, rice, and et cetera go. They're gone. It's not that they didn't stock them. It's that they stocked them and people bought them immediately and they were gone, because people are seeing what's coming, and what's coming is thin times. Think back to the Depression. Think back to pre-World War II conditions, and then think about the conditions in Europe and in the Pacific during that war. And that will give you a good idea of what they're doing and what they're planning. And a good little homework assignment is go look up how many people died of starvation during these wars that had nothing to do with getting shot by bullets, bombs, or anything like that. They just died because they didn't have enough food. Now, everybody here is so used to eating all of this fast food-like stuffs and the stuff out of the grocery stores that they might not notice that the actual food is disappearing exponentially. But they will whenever their pre-made packaged goods start to have problems getting to the store as well. Well, you got to remember, yes, indeed, that's a concoction of all kinds of industrial things that they used to make it, but their source of it originally is real food. They're getting, grains and corn and all of this stuff to make all of that stuff. So every bit of that dwindles, every bit of it that can't be shipped, that means less at the store, and I'm already seeing it. Now, keep in mind, I do live in a smaller town, and we have a limited selection of grocery buying. However, the selection we have, I've steadily seen it over the past 3 years shrink in size, availability, and now items are disappearing. And not the fancy items, like you can go get a can of raviolis, you can go get a big bag of sugary GMO cereal. That's all still there. If you want a 10-pound, 20-pound bag of rice or 20-pound bag of beans, that stuff is gone. And I think it's because some of the old timers are seeing, without looking at the news, without being conspiracy theorists, without being educated on all the topics we talk about, they have an inkling by the news that's just saying what's going on. And they've seen this before. They saw it in print. Now they're seeing it in digital and in high definition, but it's the same thing, and they know. And isn't it weird that they waited for this worldwide conflict to right about the time where almost every single veteran or people that lived in World War II are about dead now? And that's not an accident. The reason they did that is because all of those people would say no. They would say no to the whole idea. They would tell their children, they would tell their grandchildren, you know what? I don't think this is going to turn out like they think. I don't think it's for the reasons they think. And I personally, one grandfather on my mother's side was on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Surprisingly, he came back to contribute DNA to my family. And in the other side of the planet was my grandfather Godwin, who was on a Navy ship and got to see the aftermath of the surrender of Japan and the subsequent bombing of it. But that's not actually what haunted his dreams. He told me what haunted his dreams and why he was such an alcoholic. It's because he couldn't get the idea of his fellow friends and Americans that he had to go over to other ships and clean off the guts, basically, the parts of people that he knew, that he drank with, that he respected, that he liked. And he had to clean that. He had to fish people up out of the water. He got to see occupied Japan and the aftermath and all of that. He still, told me that what really haunts him is seeing his fellow countrymen torn apart, floating, and the idea of their families back home, missing them. And for what? I don't know. I don't know now. And I think the simplest thing is that the people that run the world, they have plans, but they can't do it all at once. They can't do it all at once because we'll say no. So they incrementalize these situations, they build them, they stew them, and then they get everybody hyped up to go against each other. Meanwhile, no one's thinking, how does this actually benefit me and my children and my family? It doesn't. the eradication of human beings around the world is not going to help you at all, except for in the sense that somehow we pop out the other end of it, and we have we said no, we didn't participate, and somehow the devastation didn't reach our doorsteps, and we continue to prep and grow. And, even if nothing happens and the food doesn't get short, wouldn't it be nice to know that you have that backup there? Because I do. And, my parents and my grandparents taught me to have these backup things in the house in case things go bad. And I've had it go bad in my lifetime. I've been broke, lost my job, couldn't find work, couldn't come up with money, couldn't come up with resources. But guess what? I had beans and I had rice and I had stuff that I thought ahead because I was basically trained that way. And I think we need to do that too. That's what we need to do is turn our head away from the shining light that they're using to bring in the bugs to zap them when they get there, which is this idea of this utopic Marxist world where everything's free, which obviously they're not going to do that. And, turn them away from these obviously ideas that end in death and end in mass casualties, mass murder, and just turn away from them. I mean, you would think that human beings in our 10,000-year history of constantly brutalizing and killing each other and constantly conquering lands and rebuilding them and then letting them get destroyed again and then rebuilding them again, that we would tell the rulers, no more of that. You know what? Let's keep a civilization around for a little while. Let's decide that our fellow man is worth, being alive and that we shouldn't kill them. But no, they're not going to do that. They're going to do the same old program. And they don't care who dies. They make the power and the wealth, and then they get it from collapsing empires.
Please remember to eat your ice cream made of plastic through the week and prepare. The storm has arrived. Thanks for listening to us tonight. Share the message that we are for peace. Bye for now.
Listening to Revolution Radio.
Imagine, if you will, a glimpse into the possible outcome of a million mistakes. What you are about to watch is a nightmare. It is not meant to be prophetic. It need not happen. It's the fervent and urgent prayer of all men of goodwill that it never shall happen. But in this place, in this moment, it does happen. In the midst of it comes unexpectedly over the phone the announcement of the President of the United States, the warning from the very top declaring a state of emergency of suspected enemy missiles approaching. It's anyone's guess where they might land. What city will be obliterated? How many could be lost? And last but not least, will it be me? Will it be my family, friends, my square inch on the map? Minutes go by and nothing. Right as you exhale a breath of relief, an instant wave of horror treks down your spine and a sinking feeling in the pits of your stomach. Just then the power goes out. The only light you see is the glow of your phone. Shining in your face, the icons of terror. Low battery, and even more frightening, the symbol for connection to information and loved ones gone. You try the landline in your office, desperate to contact family. Nothing at all, just a bone-chilling empty silence. Panic-stricken, you blindly forage for your car keys. Success. Something in this nightmare of a day has gone right. Now it's a desperate mad dash for your car. Your mind now in a near intellectual paralysis. Logic a struggle as you cope with a Gatling gun barrage of horrific ideas of what your family might be going through in this very moment. Miraculously, your car starts and you begin your seemingly apocalyptic drive to locate your kin. As you pass the first stop sign, the sight of civic decay is already bearing its nasty head as you speed past fights in the streets, looting and a complete halt of any semblance of an evolved civilization. To your right, a large fire. As angry, fear-filled citizens with their arms full of grocery items run from what used to be your local food market ran by a mom and pop's couple now collapses into a bonfire of dreams. Because of the commotion, your attention span has been stolen. Now before your automobile is a violent crowd. They have now surrounded your car, banging on the metal, bashing at the glass, screaming incoherently. What just a second ago was the road to salvation, now a deadly trap of circumstance and fear blocking your escape. This can't be happening, repeatedly echoing in your head as you start to mumble the phrase in a shrieking, inaudible, childlike tone to yourself. The trepidation now filling your lungs like a poison fog, suffocating and smothering in its certainty. Just then, as your heart and soul seem to be having synergistic perturbations, an alarm blares, overwhelming your senses. Immediately you recall the warning of missiles. You close your eyes and expect the end. But the alarm morphs into a sweet, familiar beckoning of your alarm clock. You open your eyes and switch off the welcoming timepiece. A warm filling of relief as you realize your family is safe in their beds, and no pending doom is written in the stars today. For a split second, you ponder the poor people of your vision, and it reinforces your confidence that you have already prepared for the any scenario. You have peace of mind your children will eat and thrive, because you invested in their future to give some stability if any break in the normality of life happens. You invested in heaven's harvest. The you in this story was a fictional you. But do you get the feeling something unthinkable is going to happen soon? I sure do. The problem is we probably won't see it coming. One morning you'll wake up and the world will be a much different place. Don't panic, prepare. Smart folks are investing in emergency food now. A wise man once said, "It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it." Heaven's Harvest is the nation's leader in emergency food storage. It's the only investment you get 100% of your money for, even better than gold. Survival experts recommend the 3-month emergency food kit. Go to heavensharvest.com, use the code ADAPT at checkout and save a mind-blowing 15%.